All right, y'all. So today we're gonna go over the agenda. So let me remove this thing out of here. Yep. All right, I will have to sit like this so that it's easier for me to draw on the paint. But please bear with me. Okay, so today we're gonna talk about lab exercise 1. You will have it will literally be part of your project. So if you do this, you basically complete a big chunk of your project. So your project has 3 parts, right? First part is building simple chips, right? And all of that. That should take you about 15 minutes, okay? And then the second part should be these, right? Mux 16, Mux 4-way 16, Demux 4-way, and then Demux 8-way, right? So if that is the case, once you complete this part, it's a little bit more difficult, but now you can use all the chips you've been using, right? And or nan or whatever you use, right? And then the next thing we'll go over is your third part, which is the palindrome detector and the encoder, right? I assume all of you are, none of you are from the honor section, right? Anyone from the honor section? Okay. Okay, that's good. Because if you're not from the honor section, you only have to do the encoder. There's a priority encoder and then an encoder. An encoder is the only thing you need to do, right? And then we can talk about brainstorm test cases, ideas for advanced chip and project 1, which is the first 2. The last 2, those we don't provide you a test file or a compare file. You will have to write it yourself. Okay, so we'll go over that. Okay, so let's talk about the MUX. Okay, so here you go. That's my trusty paint. Let's see if I can draw it. Okay, so oops, okay, now it's getting hard. Oh, wait, why is this? Okay, right here. Okay, so guess what? You have for the MUX, right? You would have an input A, input B, and a selector, right? And then you would have only a output function, right? So what would be 0, 0, 0, 0, 1, 1, 1, 1, 0, 0, 1, 1, 0, 0, 1, 1. Apologize for my 1. And then you have, I think, 0, 1, 0, 1, 0, 1, 0, and 1. Okay. And then let me move this out. Get away again. This thing is always going to be in front. Put it up here. Okay. So then F would be what? Well, if I use the correct one, or I already erased it, but let's say if select is 0, then then and B should always be 0, right? So I mean, sorry, if select is 0, that means we only care about A, right? So that means this would be 0, 0, 0, 0. Let's see, and then this should be 0 again. I mean, this would be 1. And this should be, it only care about 0. Okay, so 1. Yeah, right. Yeah. Okay, so basically the rest would be 0, right? Because if selector is 0, then we only care about A. If selector is 1, then you only care about B. So then this should be 0, 0, 0, 0. And then that should be 1, 1, 1. Okay, never mind. Let me draw it the other way. Ignore this. Sorry, y'all. This is not the best way to say this. But this should be 0, 0. That should be 0, 0, 0. That would be 0, 0, 1, 0. That should be 0 because that is it depends on A. And then 0, 1, 1. Well, this should be 1 because selector is 1 and B is 1. Okay, 1, 0, 0. Well, that should be 1 because because that's the only thing. It's select A. Okay, so then 1, 0, 1. That should be 0 because B is selecting B and B is 0. So that's the rest should be 1 then because it doesn't matter. Both A and B are 0. Okay, does that make sense? How this kind of works? Okay, so then you can take out all the 1, make a sum of products again, or I can make a K-map because that is faster. A K-map. Okay, so it would be a 2 by 4 K-map. Should look like this. Okay, Sorry, this you see the ugly drawing, how ugly it is. Just want to make sure we record the lap right. Okay, so then AB on top and then selector at the bottom. Okay, so then it will be 0, 1, 0, 0, 0, 1, 1, 1, 1, 0. Okay, so then guess what? So let's see. That will be 0. That will be 0. That would be 0. That will be 1. That will be 1. That will be 0, 1, 1. Does it make sense? Okay. So then you can circle, make the biggest circle possible right here. Ooh, that's one. Oh, one circle, another circle. Right? Got this part? Okay. All right. So what should be the minimize? Anyone want to volunteer the top circle? Okay, what should that be? F equal what? Right. Yes. Yes, that is correct. So it would be A cell naught times cell naught plus, right? Anyone wants to do the bottom?
B and not cell. B and cell.
B and cell, yes. B and cell. Right? Can you form a circuit from this expression? Y'all can, right? Yeah. Right. Yeah. So yeah, that's how you do a mux, right? And so, okay, let's clear this out. You don't save. Okay. So that is a mux. A demux would be the opposite, right? A demux would then be you take a mux and you literally flipped it around. Right? So then they would have a demux would then be would then be what? Would then be selector A. Oh, this is a mux, sorry. A demux would be the opposite. Sorry. That's the wrong one. So X. And then a demux. And then you have a selector that select, and then you have an input, A. Output would be either F1 or F0, right? Does that make sense? Right. So if selector is 0, that means here would be 1, right? And here would be 0. If selector is 1, that means this is 1, this is 0. Now, if A equal to 0, then it doesn't matter, right? If A equal to 0, then basically the chip is disabled because either you select 1 or 0, it's still going to output 0. Does that make sense, y'all? Okay. Okay. So how do you do a chain mux? Okay. So here's a cool part. Okay. So a chain mux should be like this. So let's say I think you have a 4-way. Actually, before we do that, let's do a 16 mux for 16 first. Mux 16 is basically 16 mux sit next to each other. Remember the knot we did a few weeks ago? I mean, last week. So then a knot would be like this, and then you would have 16 of them. 16. Right? Remember that? Okay. So then a mux 16 would just be, right? It would be a mux 16. Mux 16 would just be it would be A1, A 0, B0, and then the selector, we only have one bit selector because you either choose 16 bits of A or 16 bits of B. Does that make sense? Right? You only have one selector bit because at the end of the day, you choose either A0 to A15 or B0 to B15. So they only have one selector bit. Right? And then you would have output F0. and then you can scale them up. You see how the scaling works? You just scale them up from top to bottom. So there's that. So here's the mux it looks like. If it's the full A, so it's mux 16 would be like this. One selector bit, right? And then A, B, and then F, right? So the way we denote the amount of bits, we cross over the input bit, I mean the input and the output wires, and write 16 on top. That just means here's a bundle of 16 bits, here's the bundle of 16 bit, here's a bundle of 16 bits. Can you understand it? It's pretty simple. Yeah. Okay. So that's mux 16. So a mux 4-way 16, it's just, that means you would have four input, and one output. 16. Mux 4-way 16. Four-way 16 is just going to be 4 16 input bit, one 16 output bit. I mean, 4 16-bit input, 1 16-bit output. Does that make sense? Okay. Okay. So it's going to be drawing like this. Okay. So the way you do it, let's go back to 1 bit. That would probably be faster. So you would have 4-way like this, right? And then 1 output like this, right? So how do you draw that? Well, the way you draw it is you think about it, right? So you would have a drawing like this again, okay? And then 1 output, and then you would have two selector bit. So you have select 1 and cell 0. Okay, so that means select, and you would have A, B, C, D, and then you would have F right here, right? So what happened here is if selector bit is this one will select the top 2, right? And this one would select the bottom, right? Because if selector is 1, either if selector is 1, it's definitely either bit 3 or bit 4. Remember, because it's like 1, it's like 0 0 0 1 1 0 1 1, right? So this would be A, B, C, D. Actually, that's a lie. It would be yeah, A, B, C, D, right? So that means if selector 1 is 0, it's definitely either A or B, right? If selector 1 is 1, it's definitely either C or D, the upper bit, right? And then you can to narrow down to one output, use the selector, the lower bit. If the lower bit is 0, it's definitely if the selector bit 1 is 1 and the selector bit 0 is 0, that is definitely A. I mean, sorry, that's definitely C, right? If selector bit 1 is 1, selector bit 0 is 1, right? That's definitely D. Can you see it? Can y'all see how this kind of work out? Okay, right? And then if selector 1 is 0, then selector 0 is 0, then it's definitely A, and then 1B. Does that make sense? It's like a lever for 4 trains, right? You switch the track by selecting the lever. So how do you draw it? How do you design it using a mux? It would be like this. Okay, so it will be like this. So first you select the upper bit, right? So you would have first you select the lower bits first, actually. Okay. Okay, so then here's a mux. Here's a mux. Mux, yes. Okay, so then you have A. Okay, so A, B, C, D, right? And then you both connect them to cell 1, cell 0. Right? That's select the lower bit. Right? So then you chain them up. Mux cell 1. That's select the upper bit. Okay, so what it looks like. Well, let's see. If let's say if this is the input, if the input is 1, if the ABC would be like 1 1 1 1, right? Like this, right? Then let's see if selector bit 0 is actually, this might not be the right one. That's kind of weird. Let's do this. It'd be 1 1 0 0 0. Okay. So if selector bit 0 is 0, that means it's either A or C. Does that make sense? Right? If it's selector bit 0, right? That means it's either A or C. Right? Because they both connect to selector 0, bit 0. Does that make sense? The lower bit. And then once you do, then this one would give you 1. This would give you 0, right? This would give you 1. This would give you 0, right? Then you use selector bit 1 to see what it is, right? If it's 0, right here, that means it's definitely the lower, the upper bit is 0. So that would be 0 0. That would mean A. That would output 1. Does that make sense? And then if its selector bit is 0, I mean if it's 1, that means it switched the bottom, that means it's 3, right? 1 0. Go up. Does that kind of make sense? Right? How you would switch track? Any questions? Yes.
Okay, what did you say selector 1?
Yeah. So selector 1, so selector 0 is the lower bit. Selector 1 is the upper bit. Right? So if selector 1 equal to 0, that means the upper bit, that means this will be selected. Right? So that would output 1. That means the A would dictate the output. If selector bit 1 is 1, that means the upper bit is 1. Right? And you know the lower bit is 0. That means C dictates the output. Does that kind of start to click now? If you have any question, if you do, please slide. So now I will let you actually, since okay. So then now I will let you try the demux. Right? Anyone want to volunteer how to do a demux? Please. If you do. Dude, I wish I had try to
Can we use mux to do demux?
you can do basically once you do the mux, right? And you do a demux, then you can use a demux to do the demux 4-way.
Oh.
Yeah. So a mux would be a demux would just be, I mean, you just draw a truth table out and then you get the demux. Yes, like this. Right? Anyone want to try a demux? Okay. 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 So let me try the demux. Okay. So let's new again. One save. Okay. So it will be like this, right? So we already know. So a demux look like this. Oops, that's completely wrong again. It should be like this. DM, let's just call it DM, and then output, and then one selector, right? So if the A is 1, remember, then it select whatever it is. If A is 0, that it disabled the chip. That's for sure. So how do you do it in a 4-way? Well, a 4-way should just look like this, right? So you would have one input, right? And then you would have what? A 4 output, right? So remember, a mux, you select the lower bits and then you select the upper bits, right? With the demux, you literally flip it around. you select the upper bit first, and then you select the lower bits. It's gonna be like this. So here's a mux, right? ID mux. And then A, okay? So then it's gonna be like this, right? Select 1, right? That you select the upper bit, right? And then you would chain them again, get another two more demux, and then you can select whatever the output you want. So then this both will then connect to cell 0. So there would be A, B, C, D, right? So here's how it works. Let's say your selected bit is 0, the upper bit is 0. That means, let's say here's 1. Whoop, go up, right? Right, it definitely will go up to either A or B. And then you do select bit 0 to see if it's 0, that means A. If it's selected 0 as 1, 0, so select 0 or the lower bit is 1, it's definitely B. Right? Does that make sense?
So it's select 1 with 0 to go up?
Yeah, because it's a, so that means the upper bit is 0. So it can either be A or B. It can't be C or D because C or D requires the upper bit to be 1. Because remember, you can, if you don't remember A, B, C, D, you can draw it like, you can name it as 0, 0, 0, 1, 1, 0, 1, 1. Right? So then 0, because both of them have the upper bit equals 0, that means this selector, if it's 0, it's definitely A or B. Does that, you can see it now?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Can y'all see it? How you select upper bit will select the first bit, it's either A or B. So if selector bit 1 is 1, that means the upper bit is 1. That means it's definitely either C or D. Right? Yes.
So basically, like input, it's like 1, like 0, it just disables it.
Yes. If A is 0, it's this for demux it was disabled.
And then if it's 1, basically it just like determines which like A, B, C,
A, B, C, D, it's gonna get out.
And then like every other one is 0, and then that one is that the output.
Yes, yes. So that means if A is 1, right, and selector bit 1 is 1, is 0, it's either A or B. It will be 1. C, D is definitely going to be 0. And then if selector bit 0 said select equal to 0, that means A was going to be 1. The rest would be 0.
So that A is not related to that A.
What other A?
The first A, because the input A is different.
Oh, sorry. I should have named it like F, like this output. Yes. Thank you for that. Yes. So on the stream, this A is complete. I should have named this not A, but let's say F. Right? The function output. It's basically the inverse or the reverse of the mux.
Wait, what the input?
The input will be F.
Can the input be 0?
Yeah. If the input is 0, the whole chip is disabled.
Oh, so it really isn't.
Yeah. Because if it's 0, right, regardless of wherever it goes, it's going to be output 0. And
Okay.
the rest would still be 0. So the whole chip would be all output 0.
But if it's 1, it has a chance of outputting any 4 of those.
Any 4 of them, depending on the selection.
Okay.
Yeah.
Are those 2 demux as well, or does that matter?
Oh, sorry.
This is demux.
Oh, yes, these are demux as well. If you see 1 input and 2 output, that is a demux. A mux is like 2 input, 1 output. Yeah. Does that make sense, y'all? Okay. 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 So there's that. Do y'all feel a little bit more comfortable about all the chips that we have to do in LE1? Right. Any question about LE1? That's it for LE1. Yeah. This one, everything, this whole thing is called a demux 4-way. Right? Because you have 1 input, 4 output. A mux 4-way would then be 4 input, 1 output. And if it said mux 16, that means it's 16-bit mux, which means it has 16-bit input, 16-bit output. So in this case, there's a one called, let me see. there's one called, I can open it up. It's called MUX 4-way 16. Well, that just means it's a 4-way MUX, but all the input are 16 bits. Does that make sense? So you want to build the MUX 16 first. I think in the project they don't actually have a MUX 16. So if you do the I'm sorry, if in the project they don't have a MUX 16. So if you do a MUX 16 in the LE, you can use them to build the MUX always 16 in the project. There is? Yeah. Well, because in the, make sure it's the project you downloaded. Yeah. Not the one from Nanotechnics. Oh. Yeah. There's a project folder. It's kind of confusing, but the Nanotechnics project, they are not our project. The project that you do is on Canvas. Yeah, people got confused. Yeah. Okay. Does that make sense? Any question? So let's look at the palindrome. Palindrome detector. All right. So this one now I have to draw again. Okay. Okay. So can anyone define for me what a palindrome is? Yes. Backward. Yes. All right. So the classic example is race car, right? Race car. Right? If you flip it around, it's still going to be race car. Right? So in bit terms, what happened is you have A, B, C, D, E, right? And then the output will be F. Oops, sorry. Right. So can you tell me? Okay, actually, let me give you an example. Is 0, 0, 0, 0, 0. Is that a palindrome? Yes, right? Is 0, let's do 1, 1, 1. Actually, it's better to go slowly. 1, 0, 0, 0, 1. Is that a palindrome? Yes, right? 1, 1, 0, 1, 1. Yes, right? And then 1, 1, 1, 1, 1. Yes, right? All right, let's see if we're missing something. Yes, we do. What happened if we flip the bits right here? That will be what? 0, 1, 1, 1, 0. Okay, that's a palindrome. 0, 0, 1, 0, 0. That's a palindrome. And then the last case, can anyone tell me what the last case is? Can you see any other palindrome? Yep. 0, 1, 0, 1, 0. Right? Did I have it? Nope. Oh. Is there any other one? There's one more.
1, 0, 1, 0, 1.
There you go. So how many Ks do we have? 8. I think the last lab I've accidentally made 7. So I forgot one last case. All right. So here's all the, right? The rest would not give you a palindrome. Right? Can you see it? So you can't either, how do you verify this works? Because in the project, you will not get the compare file and the TFT file for palindrome and the encoder. Right? So your goal is to write test cases. So your bare minimum should be all these test cases, right? And then some more test cases for the non-correct palindrome. Right? You can be very extensive and do what 2 to the 5th 32 combos, right? That works too. But I don't know if you want to go sit there and do all 32. Okay. So how do you form a circuits out, right? You can either go and do a map, which would not scale well this time because you would have to draw an 8x4, an 8x4 palindrome. I mean, an 8x4 K map. Or you can just take all the Ks that is 1 anyway, because That's all it matters, right? The rest doesn't matter. Well, is they all 0? The rest, then you can just take all these and then write them out and then use traditional way of doing the minimization. Does that make sense? It's very tedious, but remember, this is the only tedious part about this whole project, right? Okay. Your mux and demux can be due in 1 hour, and then first few chips can be done in 15 minutes. So this is the only thing that is a little bit more difficult. Any question about the palindrome? Okay. So the last chip you want to know? Any question? Okay. Okay. So the last chip. Save. Okay. So the last chip would be a encoder. Okay. So an encoder looks like this. The truth table looks like this. So a 4 to 2 encoder looks like this. Okay, so it will be 1, 0. So let's do this. A, B, C, D, and then F0. I mean F1. Let's do F1. And then F0. Upper bit, lower bit. So if D is 1, 0, 0, 0, this would be 0, 0. Okay. And then 0, 0, 1, 0, that will be 0, 1. 0, 1, 0, 0, that would be 1, 0. 1, 0, 0, 0, that would be 1, 1. Right? So how does this work? Can anyone see a pattern? Can you see a pattern? So it's basically what the power of 2. It basically dictate what bit, right, is 1, right? If it's 0, 0, that means the first bit or the least significant bit will be 1. 0, 1 will be the second. 1, 0 will be the third. And then 1, 0, 0, 0 will be the fourth. Right? So in the encoder, it specifically states that the state where there are 2 input equal to 1 is prohibited. Right? So only 1 can be plugged in. The rest must be 0. So you can see this is how you can use a demux to be able to be able to implement the restriction, right? Because it's 1 input, depending on the selection, only 1 output is 0. I mean, only 1 input is output is 1. Like the rest should be 0. Does that make sense? Can you see it? Can y'all see how you can do a demux to restrict that it's prohibited? Right. I don't know if they ask you to definitely use a demux on this, or you can use, but you can use a demux to basically restrict the fact that only 1 input can go in. But if you don't, you just need. I think on the test cases, they just state the fact that these are the only 4 you need. So you can build a circuit out. Take them and then do the truth table and all of that. Any questions? Does this kind of make sense? Okay, so then the priority one, this one is for people of honor section, but if you're curious about the priority one, there's a priority one for the honor section. What happened is it takes in how many ever inputs. Priority encoder is the exact same as an encoder, but you can get whatever input you want. Even 2, 1, 3, 1, 4 1s is still gonna work. But it only cares about the most significant digit. Okay. So if you Google, oops, that's a wrong one. 422 priority encoder. It looks like this. Please load. Okay, there you go. Do they not have a priority encoder? Okay. Well, now this one is the inversion, not this one. Yeah, here we go. It's an 8x3 priority encoder. That works too. So wait for it. Let me okay. You see, here's where I introduce you to a new concept. That just means that it doesn't care what the output behind it. If the most significant digit is 1, whatever it is, then we'll take it. Right? So if this is 1 0 0 0 0 1 1 x x 0 0. So let's see if it's something like this. If it's if it's, let's say, if it is, let me new delete. Where's the delete at? New. Okay. Right. So if it's 0 0 0 1 1 0 1 1 like this, right? Then it doesn't care what this is. It just see this and they're like, well, the output is what? It's gonna be 1 1 1 0 1 2 no 1 2 3 4 5. Okay, so the 5th bit would be 1. I mean, it will be 5. So what is 5 in binary? It will be 0 1. Right, 4 plus 1. Yeah. So it doesn't care the rest is. It just sees this bit like, it's 1. So the rest, it would definitely be 1 0 1. Right? Yeah, but you don't need this. You just, this is for more like honor section if they're curious about it. So for a K-map with a don't care, if you ever encounter a K-map with a don't care, because it doesn't matter if it's 0 1, you are allowed to circle them just like 1. You can treat them as 1. So in this case, if there's a don't care value right here and right here, right, you can circle them like this. Can you see it? And then you can circle them like this. So 2 big circles. You treat X the same as 1. Because I mean, it makes sense, right? It doesn't matter if it's 1 or 0, it's still going to be an number. So you can make a much simpler circuits with much simpler circuits with the priority encoding.
So whenever the first number comes up at the highest priority, it's represented by a number binary.
Yes.
So if all of them were zeros except for the last one,
Then it would be 0 0 1.
It'd be 0 0 1.
0 0 1.
Oh, okay, it's not represented by 0 0 0.
No. Because if all of them, right? I'm sorry, yes, it is 0 0 0 because it's 2 to the zeros. Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, you're right.
So if the second one was 1, that'd be represented by a 1 in binary, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Because remember, it's 2 to the 0, 2 to the 1.
Mm-hmm.
So whatever the biggest significant digit is, you can do a log and get a value.
Okay. So shouldn't that one be represented by 4?
Oh, there's a 1 right here as well. 0 1. My bad. It's 1 4. Yeah. Sorry about that. Yes, it's 0 4. Does that make sense now? A little bit sense. Sorry about that. It's 1 0. Again, it's for honor section if you're curious. Yes, this. You see it? Does any other question? Okay. Yeah. So that is basically your project 1. Right? You do the mux, all the gates, little gates. You do a mux, a demux, and then you go on to do the encoder if you are non-honor section. And if you're honor section, you do the priority encoder. Okay. I will tell you that you know, for a project, you can just look online for this see what the circuit looks like. But I highly encourage you don't do that. You actually just go and through the process and try to draw it. The reason is on a test, right? We are gonna give you some new circuits that is still simple, but the output might be like it's still doable, but it's not going to be something standard, right? Like a demux or a mux, right? So by going through a process of drawing the truth table out, understand how to go convert from a truth table to a sum of products, and then from a sum of products, or the Boolean expression, from Boolean expression, minimize it, and then build the HDL, and then debug the HDL. That is much more robust. Not just for example for this, but for make sure in the future you build even more difficult chip that you can start from the bottom. Any other question? Any? Yes.
So we would be building the box with like the ands and the ones.
Yes. So once you build a chip, you can use them. Yes. So that's why we built basic chip first, and then we built the mux and demugs. I saw people who did the 16-bit mux using 16-bit four-way mux using just a mux, and it's like 40 lines of code. Yeah, you don't have to do that. If you already did the 16-bit mux first, then you can do a four-way much easier. Okay. Any other questions? Concerns? Okay. Yeah. Okay. Okay. Then you're more than welcome to continue working, or you're more than welcome to pack up and have lunch and have a good day.
I had a question about the power.
Yes. Let me end the recording.
I walked in right at 35. Or you gave a quiz 5 minutes.